I paid for a premium VIP seat, not this garbage here. Do you know who I am? Karen, the white woman said firmly to Sophia, the flight attendant. Soon, the sound of a sharp slap echoed through the aircraft cabin. Oh my God! She assaulted the flight attendant, shouted a passenger nearby. You deserved that. How dare you treat me this way? Karen shouted, attempting to grab at Sophia's uniform as if to continue the assault. Sophia remained composed despite the slap. She didn't flinch or retaliate the slap. She didn't need to, because this story holds the biggest karma that can ever happen to a Karen that assaulted a flight attendant on air. Before we start the story, if you believe everyone should be treated with respect no matter who they are, then hit the subscribe button, type respect in the comments, and tell us where you're watching from. It was a bright Tuesday morning at Miami International Airport. The flight to Seattle was preparing for boarding, with 163 passengers ready for the 6-hour journey across the country. Among the crew preparing to welcome passengers was Sophia Martinez, a 28-year-old flight attendant with 5 years of experience with the airline. Colleagues described Sophia as the consummate professional, always smiling, efficient, and with an uncanny ability to diffuse tense situations. As passengers began the boarding process, the atmosphere was light and pleasant, and the boarding process was moving smoothly. Among the passengers was Karen Wilson, a 46-year-old business executive from a financial management firm, was engaged in an increasingly heated discussion with the gate agent. Standing at 5'7", with an expensive designer suit and meticulously maintained blonde bob, Karen carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being in charge. Her Louis Vuitton carry-on and matching handbag subtly communicated her financial status, as did the multiple designer accessories adorning her wrists and fingers. As Sophia, the flight attendant, greeted passengers at the aircraft door with her characteristic warm smile, she noticed Karen immediately. "Welcome aboard, ma'am," Sophia offered warmly as Karen approached the aircraft entrance. Karen barely acknowledged her, brushing past with clear irritation as she made her way down the aisle. Sophia maintained her professionalism, continuing to welcome each passenger with genuine warmth despite the small interaction. After years in the industry, one dismissive passenger was hardly worth disrupting her positive mindset. 15 minutes into the boarding process, however, Sophia's attention was drawn to a commotion in the Economy Plus section. Excuse me. Karen's voice projected above the ambient noise of passengers settling in. "This cannot possibly be right. This was not what I paid for." Sophia made her way down the aisle to find Karen standing in the Economy Plus section, gesturing dramatically at her assigned seat, 12A, a window seat with extra legroom in the Premium Economy section. "Is there a problem with your seat, ma'am?" Sophia asked calmly. "Yes, there's a problem," Karen responded, not bothering to lower her voice. "I booked a sit with extra legroom, but I'm expected to sit in this? This doesn't even have enough legroom for a child, let alone someone who paid premium prices." Several nearby passengers shifted uncomfortably. The Economy Plus seat actually offered a generous 36 inches of pitch, significantly more than standard economy seats, and was considered quite comfortable by most travelers' standards. "I understand your frustration about not getting the first-class upgrade," Sophia responded with genuine empathy. "Let me clarify that this is indeed the Economy Plus seat that matches your boarding pass. It does offer an additional 4 inches of legroom compared to standard economy." "That's ridiculous," Karen shot back. "I've been in Economy Plus before, and it was nothing like this cramped space." With patient professionalism, Sophia pulled out her tablet and brought up the seat map. "I'd be happy to verify your reservation. May I see your boarding pass again?" Karen thrust the document toward her with visible annoyance. Sophia carefully compared it to her tablet information. "Yes, This confirms that seat 12A is the correct economy plus seat that was assigned to you. So you're not going to do anything about this? Karen demanded, her voice growing louder. This is how you treat customers who spend thousands with your airline? By now, the interaction had caught the attention of many nearby passengers. An elderly couple seated across the aisle exchanged concerned glances. A college-age student a few rows back had subtly taken out his phone, though it wasn't yet clear if he was texting or recording. In seat 14C, a man who would later be identified as an off-duty police officer watched the interaction with increasing interest. "I understand your disappointment, ma'am," Sophia continued, her voice remaining steady and professional. "While I can't offer you a first-class seat, as those are all occupied, I'd be happy to bring you an extra pillow and blanket once we're in the air, and perhaps a complimentary beverage of your choice to make your flight more comfortable." "That's your solution? A pillow?" Karen scoffed. She turned to other passengers nearby. "Are you all hearing this? Is everyone just okay with how this airline treats its customers?" The gambit for public support fell noticeably flat. Most passengers averted their eyes, some put on headphones, while others gave subtle head shakes, not in agreement with Karen but in disapproval of her behavior. The elderly woman across the aisle finally spoke up. "Dear, the seats are actually quite nice. My husband and I are quite comfortable." Karen shot her a withering look before turning back to Sophia. "Fine, I'll sit here, but I want it noted in my customer profile that this treatment is unacceptable, and I'll expect more than just a pillow for this inconvenience." Sophia nodded professionally. "I'll make a note in the system, and we'll do our best to make your flight comfortable. Please let me know if you need anything once we're in the air." As Sophia moved away to help other passengers, Karen reluctantly took her seat, aggressively stowing her designer bag under the seat in front of her and making a show of how uncomfortable she found the space to be. As the boarding door closed and the safety demonstration began, Karen could be heard making a phone call despite the crew's instructions to put devices in airplane mode. As the flight reached its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, the seatbelt sign dinged off, and the cabin crew prepared to begin their in-flight service. Most passengers settled into the familiar rhythm of a long flight. Some opened laptops, others browsed the entertainment options, and a few reclined their seats for a nap. But in seat 12A, Karen Wilson was doing none of these things. Instead, she was visibly seething, repeatedly pressing her call button every few minutes. Sophia Martinez approached with her characteristic warm smile, determined to provide excellent service despite the challenging situation. "How can I help you, ma'am?" she asked, leaning slightly toward Karen to hear her request over the ambient noise of the aircraft. "This seat is completely unacceptable," Karen stated flatly. "I can barely move, and it's freezing in this section of the plane." Sophia nodded with understanding. "I'd be happy to bring you a blanket to help with the temperature, and perhaps a pillow for additional comfort." "AS promised. I can also offer you a complimentary beverage of your choice once we begin our drink service." Karen scoffed audibly. "A blanket and pillow? That's your solution to putting me in this cramped seat when I should be in first class. I can't even fully extend my legs." The irony was apparent to nearby passengers. Karen was of average height, and the economy plus seat she occupied provided 36 inches of pitch, which was ample legroom for most travelers. Several passengers exchanged glances as Karen continued her complaints. "I'd also like to offer you a complimentary premium beverage. Perhaps a glass of wine or a cocktail might help make your flight more enjoyable," Sophia suggested, still maintaining her professional demeanor. "I don't drink during business trips," Karen snapped, then immediately contradicted herself. "And anyway, I'd need something stronger than wine to make the seat tolerable." Sophia continued to smile patiently. I understand your frustration. I'll bring you that blanket and pillow right away, and you can decide about the beverage when we begin our service. Is there anything else I can assist you with at the moment? Yes, you can find me a seat with actual legroom, Karen retorted loudly, clearly hoping other passengers would hear her complaint. She looked around, seemingly waiting for support from fellow travelers. Isn't anyone else uncomfortable in these ridiculous seats? How can they charge premium prices for this? Her attempt to rally support fell conspicuously flat. The businessman across the aisle pointedly put on noise-canceling headphones. The elderly couple a few rows ahead turned briefly, but quickly returned to their conversation. A woman in the row behind simply rolled her eyes and returned to her book. Undeterred by the lack of support, Karen continued. This whole section should be complaining. The airline is clearly taking advantage of all of us. A middle-aged man several rows back finally spoke up, but not with the solidarity Karen was hoping for. Ma'am, the seats are fine. Some of us are trying to relax. Karen shot him a withering glare before turning back to Sophia. Fine. Bring the blanket. But I want to speak to the lead flight attendant about my treatment. I'll bring those items right away, Sophia replied professionally. And I am the lead flight attendant on this flight. I assure you, we want to make your journey as comfortable as possible within our capabilities. As Sophia walked away to retrieve the requested items, Karen's expression darkened further. She pulled out her phone, despite the fact that it should have been in airplane mode, and appeared to be typing furiously, likely composing an angry email or social media post about her perceived mistreatment. Within minutes, Sophia returned with a plush blanket and pillow, placing them carefully on Karen's tray table. Here you are. Our drink service will begin shortly. Please let me know if there's anything else you need. Karen took the items without a word of thanks, dramatically shaking out the blanket as if it were inadequate before wrapping it around herself. The performance aspect of her dissatisfaction was becoming increasingly apparent to those around her. This wasn't just about comfort. It was about being seen and acknowledged as someone who deserved special treatment. 3 rows behind Karen, a mother traveling alone with her toddler, was doing everything possible to console her son. The child, no more than 3 years old, had begun crying as his ears responded to the cabin pressure. The young black mother was clearly experienced and prepared. She offered him a sippy cup to drink from, a tablet with his favorite cartoon, and gentle reassurances. Most passengers recognized this as a normal, if unfortunate, part of air travel. Children sometimes get uncomfortable. Karen Wilson, however, appeared to have no interest in this social contract. After less than a minute of the child's crying, she unbuckled her seatbelt, stood up abruptly, and turned toward the source of the noise. With hands pointed aggressively and voice projecting to ensure maximum attention, she addressed the struggling mother. Can you please control your brat? Some of us are trying to work here. Karen's voice cut through the cabin noise with startling sharpness. The young mother looked up, mortified and already stressed, her face flushing with embarrassment. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to calm him down. His ears are hurting from the pressure. Well, try harder, Karen snapped. Or maybe don't bring children on flights if you can't keep them quiet. It's completely inconsiderate to the rest of us who paid for a peaceful journey. The child, sensing his mother's distress, only cried louder. The mother, now near tears herself, desperately tried to soothe him while withering under Karen's public shaming. People like you and your son should not even be allowed in this plane, she muttered, just loud enough to be heard. The phrase carried an unmistakable undertone. The young mother and child were black. Sophia, alerted by the commotion, quickly made her way to the scene. Is everything all right here? She asked, immediately assessing the situation. The mother's distress, Karen's confrontational stance, and the uncomfortable expressions of surrounding passengers told her everything she needed to know. "No, everything is not all right," Karen said before anyone else could respond. "I'm trying to get some work done, and that child has been screaming non-stop. No one is doing anything about it." The mother, fighting back tears, looked up at Sophia. "I'm so sorry. I'm really trying. He's having trouble with the pressure in his ears." Sophia gave the mother a reassuring smile. "You're doing fine. It happens to all children sometimes." She turned to Karen with a more serious expression. "Ma'am, I need to ask you to return to your seat. I also need to remind you that respectful language is required at all times on this flight." "Respectful? What about respect for paying customers who can't even hear themselves think because of undisciplined children?" Karen countered. Sophia lowered her voice, speaking firmly but quietly enough that only Karen and those immediately nearby could hear. "Ma'am, I heard what you said, and language with racial undertones is absolutely not tolerated on this aircraft. This is your only warning on this matter. Please return to your seat now, or we will have further issues." For a brief moment, Karen seemed taken aback that she had been called out directly. But rather than backing down, her expression shifted to one of indignation. "I didn't say anything racial. This is ridiculous. You're completely misrepresenting me." "Ma'am, please return to your seat immediately," Sophia repeated, her tone leaving no room for argument. With a dramatic huff, Karen turned and walked back to her seat, loudly muttering about oversensitive people and ridiculous accusations as she went. Sophia took a moment to check on the mother and child, offering a small activity kit that sometimes helped distract young children. "Don't worry about it," she reassured the mother. "You're doing great, and these things happen. Can I bring you anything to help?" The grateful mother accepted the kit, thanking Sophia repeatedly for her kindness. Within a few minutes, the child had indeed become distracted by the colorful toys and was quieting down. The incident could have ended there. But Karen Wilson wasn't done making her presence known on the plane. As the meal service began about an hour into the flight, the cabin crew proceeded down the narrow aisle with their carts. When they reached Karen's row, instead of moving her legs to allow the cart to pass, as is the standard etiquette on any flight, she remained precisely where she was, effectively blocking the aisle. "Excuse me, ma'am," said Carlos, another flight attendant working the cart. "Would you mind adjusting your legs so we can bring the meal service through?" Karen looked up slowly, as if surprised by the request. "I'm already cramped in this inadequate seat. I don't have anywhere to move to." Carlos maintained his professional demeanor. "Just a slight adjustment would be enough, ma'am, just for a moment so we can pass." "This is outrageous," Karen announced loudly. "First, I'm downgraded from my rightful seat, then I'm attacked for requesting basic courtesy from other passengers, and now I'm being told I have to make myself even more uncomfortable just so you can push your cart by?" The passengers waiting for their meals exchanged glances of growing frustration. One passenger called from several rows back, "Come on, lady, we're all hungry back here." Instead of complying, Karen pulled out her phone and, to the astonishment of those nearby, began recording herself. Holding her phone up to capture her face with the flight attendants in the background, she started speaking in a performative voice that was clearly meant for a social media audience. "I'm currently being harassed on a flight from Miami to Seattle," she narrated into her phone. "After being improperly downgraded from my first-class seat that I paid for, I've been repeatedly singled out and discriminated against by the flight attendants." Carlos looked genuinely confused. "Ma'am, we're simply trying to provide meal service to all passengers. Could you please just adjust your position slightly?" Karen continued her narration as if he hadn't spoken. "Now they're trying to force me to contort myself in this already cramped seat just so they can push their cart by. This is the kind of treatment loyal customers receive on this airline. Have you ever been on a flight with someone who seemed determined to make everyone miserable? What would you have done if you were seated near Karen? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button now to enjoy more of these stories. Several rows back, a group of teenagers had taken notice of the unfolding drama. One nudged another and whispered loudly enough to be heard. "Dude, this is definitely going on TikTok. Classic Karen in the wild." Another teen already had their phone out, discreetly recording the interaction. "This is going to get so many views," they whispered to their friend. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Sophia, noticing the commotion, quickly made her way back to the scene. Understanding immediately what was happening, she approached calmly. "Miss Wilson, I notice you're recording. I need to inform you that while personal recording is permitted for private use, harassment of crew members or other passengers is not. Additionally, if you're broadcasting live, I must remind you that in-flight Wi-Fi is not to be used for live streaming. Now, could you please adjust your position to allow the meal service to continue?" Karen swiveled her phone to capture Sophia. "And here's the same flight attendant who earlier accused me of making racial comments when I simply asked for basic courtesy from other passengers. Notice how she's singling me out again?" The racial component, which had been implicit before, now became more explicit as Karen continued her performance for her phone. "I suppose it's because I don't look like her or the other passengers she's defending," she added, with unmistakable implication toward Sophia's black skin. Audible gasps came from several passengers. The racist undertone was no longer subtle, it was blatant. A middle-aged black woman seated across the aisle spoke firmly. "That's enough. Nobody's discriminating against you. You're being asked to do exactly what every passenger does during meal service." Karen's eyes narrowed as she turned toward the woman who had spoken. "I didn't ask for your opinion," she snapped, the contempt in her voice palpable. She then returned to her phone narration. "And now other passengers are ganging up on me too." By this point, Carlos had retreated with the meal cart, temporarily halting service to that section while Sophia attempted to manage the escalating situation. A second flight attendant, James, approached from the front of the aircraft, sensing that additional support might be needed. "Miss Wilson," Sophia said with remarkable composure given the circumstances, "I need to be very clear. Racist language or implications are not tolerated on this aircraft. This is your final warning on this matter. Additionally, you need to allow the meal service to proceed. If you cannot comply with these basic requirements, we will have to take further action." "Are you threatening me now?" Karen demanded, still recording. "I want your full name and employee number. You'll be hearing from both my attorney and the airline's corporate offices about this treatment." James stepped forward. "Ma'am, we really need to de-escalate this situation. All we're asking is for you to allow the meal cart to pass, the same as every other passenger on this aircraft." Karen finally moved her legs, but not without making a show of how difficult and painful it supposedly was to do so. "There, are you happy now? I hope you all enjoy watching a paying customer being abused." As the meal service finally continued, Karen put her phone down but continued making loudly disparaging comments about Sophia, the airline, and some of the passengers who had spoken up. The racial undertones became increasingly explicit, with comments about certain people being given preferential treatment. The atmosphere in the cabin had transformed completely from the relaxed start of the flight. Tension hung in the air, with passengers exchanging uneasy glances. Some were clearly uncomfortable, while others appeared angry at Karen's behavior. The teenagers continued to surreptitiously record, recognizing the viral potential of what they were witnessing. When the meal service reached Karen, she examined her tray with exaggerated disgust. What is this supposed to be? It doesn't look anything like the premium meal options advertised. That's our chicken pasta option, ma'am, as you selected when you checked in, Carlos explained patiently. I'm allergic to gluten, Karen announced suddenly. I can't eat pasta. I need a gluten-free option immediately. Carlos checked his tablet. I'm sorry, ma'am, but we don't have any record of a gluten-free meal request for your seat. Dietary requirements need to be submitted at least 24 hours before the flight. This is ridiculous, Karen fumed. I'm telling you right now that I have an allergy. Are you refusing to accommodate a medical condition? Is that even legal? Although no indication of this alleged allergy had been mentioned during the previous 2 hours of the flight, including when Karen had been offered snacks containing gluten, Sophia immediately approached with genuine concern. Miss Wilson, food allergies are something we take very seriously. While we don't have a dedicated gluten-free meal prepared, let me check what alternative options we might have available that would be safe for you. Despite Sophia's obvious attempt to help, Karen seemed determined to be unsatisfied. So you're admitting you're unprepared to handle basic medical needs? What kind of airline is this? We can accommodate many dietary needs with advance notice, Sophia explained calmly. Let me see what we have available that's naturally gluten-free. Within minutes, Sophia returned with a carefully assembled alternative. Fresh fruit, a sealed package of gluten-free snack mix, a part of the airline's emergency allergy kit, and a salad with the croutons removed. I've personally checked these items, and they should be safe for someone with gluten sensitivity, she explained. We also have yogurt available if you'd prefer that. Karen looked at the offerings with visible contempt. This is what you expect me to eat for a 6-hour flight? A few pieces of fruit and a tiny bag of snacks? After downgrading me and subjecting me to harassment? I'm very sorry, but this is the best we can offer without advance notice of dietary restrictions. Sophia explained, her patience remarkable given the circumstances. For future flights, you can add meal preferences to your reservation, and we'll ensure. I want to speak to the pilot, Karen interrupted, immediately. The captain is flying the aircraft, ma'am. I'm the lead flight attendant, and I'm doing everything possible to accommodate your needs. Karen's face flushed with anger. So you're refusing to even let me speak to someone in authority? This is absurd. Ma'am, what kind of snacks do you have in first class? I'm sure they have plenty of gluten-free options up there where I was supposed to be seated. Sophia took a deep breath. The snack options are similar throughout the aircraft, though first class does have some different meal preparations. I can check if there are any appropriate alternatives, but... Then do that. Karen interrupted again. Go check what's available in the section I actually paid for. At this point, Sophia's colleague James leaned in. I'll handle this section for a few minutes, he offered quietly, giving Sophia a brief moment of respite from the increasingly hostile interaction. Sophia nodded gratefully and went to check the first-class cabin for any suitable alternatives. Though it was clear to everyone watching that her efforts would likely be met with continued hostility, regardless of what she found. When Sophia returned several minutes later with a gluten-free protein plate that had been reserved for a first-class passenger with a documented allergy who had generously offered to take the regular meal instead, Karen had already worked herself into an even greater state of agitation. Here you are, Miss Wilson. Our first-class cabin had one gluten-free protein plate available. One of our passengers was kind enough to accept an alternative so you could have this option. Instead of gratitude, Karen examined the plate with suspicion. What took you so long? My blood sugar is dropping and you're wandering around the plane for 20 minutes? It had been less than 5 minutes, as every passenger in the vicinity could attest, but Sophia didn't correct her. I apologize for the wait. I wanted to ensure we found something appropriate for your dietary needs. Karen picked at the food with her fork, then pushed it away dramatically. This doesn't even look fresh. And there's no dessert option? The regular meals all got dessert. The situation had moved beyond merely uncomfortable into something approaching surreal. Passengers were now watching openly, many with expressions of disbelief at the treatment Sophia was enduring. The elderly gentleman who had been quietly observing shook his head and muttered, "Unbelievable," just loudly enough to be heard. Karen's head snapped toward him. "Do you have something to say?" Before the man could respond, Karen continued, her voice rising. "All of you sitting in judgment, but none of you standing up for a customer being abused by this airline." It was at this moment that what had been a tense but contained situation exploded into chaos. Karen abruptly stood up, the protein plate tumbling from her tray table onto the floor. "That's it. I've had enough of this treatment." Sophia stepped back slightly, maintaining a professional distance. "Ms. Wilson, I need you to return to your seat and fasten your seatbelt." "Or what?" Karen challenged, stepping into the aisle. "You'll continue to discriminate against me? Mock my medical condition? I want your name and employee number right now. My name is Sophia Martinez, and my employee ID is visible on my badge." Sophia replied calmly, though tension was evident in her voice. "Now please, return to your seat." "Martinez? Of course," Karen scoffed, the racist implication hanging in the air. "Well, Miss Martinez, you can expect to be looking for a new job tomorrow. My company does millions in business with this airline, and when they hear how I've been treated—" "Miss Wilson," Sophia interrupted firmly, "this is your final warning. Return to your seat immediately, or we will have to take measures to ensure the safety of this flight." The teenagers were recording openly now, no longer bothering to be discreet. One whispered loudly to another, "This is gonna blow up online." Total Karen meltdown at 35,000 feet. Karen snapped. In a movement that shocked everyone watching, she lunged forward toward Sophia. "You think this is funny? You think ruining my flight is entertaining?" With no warning, Karen's hand swung upward and connected with Sophia's face, a sharp, deliberate slap that echoed through the cabin. Gasps and shouts erupted from the passengers. The sound of the slap seemed to hang in the air as Sophia stumbled backward, her hand going to her cheek in shock. "Oh my God, she hit her!" someone shouted. "She assaulted the flight attendant," called another voice. "You deserved that. How dare you treat me this way?" Karen shouted, attempting to grab at Sophia's uniform as if to continue the assault. James intervened, placing himself between Karen and Sophia. "Ma'am, stop immediately. Return to your seat now." "Don't touch me." Karen shrieked, though no one had laid a hand on her. "I'm being attacked." The absurdity of this claim, as she was clearly the aggressor, might have been almost comical if the situation weren't so serious. Several passengers had their phones out now, recording the chaos as it unfolded. The off-duty officer reached the scene and identified himself. "Ma'am, I'm a police officer. You need to stand down and return to your seat immediately." "This is none of your business," Karen shouted, still trying to get around James to reach Sophia, who was being attended to by another flight attendant who had rushed from the front of the plane. A red mark was clearly visible on Sophia's cheek where she had been struck. As Karen continued to resist, shouting accusations and attempting to advance toward Sophia, the reality of the situation became clear to everyone watching. What had begun as merely entitled and unpleasant behavior had crossed into criminal assault at 35,000 feet. The captain's voice came over the intercom, steady but authoritative. "This is your captain speaking. Due to a security incident in the main cabin, we will be making an emergency landing in Denver. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. Cabin crew, prepare for landing." The announcement sent a ripple of murmurs through the cabin. An emergency landing was serious. It meant significant delays, misconnections, and major disruption for all 163 people on board. Yet not a single passenger seemed to be blaming the airline. All eyes were on Karen Wilson, whose actions had forced a plane load of people to divert hundreds of miles off course. As the off-duty officer and 2 male passengers helped restrain Karen and return her to her seat, where she continued to shout accusations and justifications for her behavior, Sophia was brought to the front galley area. Despite the assault, she remained composed, though visibly shaken. A flight attendant applied a cold compress to her reddened cheek while she communicated with the cockpit about the situation. Karen's voice could still be heard from her seat. "I didn't even hit her that hard. She's totally faking it for attention." The teenagers who had been recording exchanged glances, one of them mouthing silently to the other, "Got it all. This is going viral for sure." As the aircraft began its descent toward Denver, the mood in the cabin was a mixture of tension, anticipation, and a strange sort of solidarity. Passengers spoke quietly among themselves, many expressing concern for Sophia and disbelief at Karen's behavior. Several offered to provide their contact information to serve as witnesses for any charges that might follow. In a bizarre twist that would later be highlighted in news coverage of the incident, Karen continued to film herself intermittently, apparently still believing she was the victim in the situation. "They're making an emergency landing because I stood up for myself," she narrated to her phone. "This is what happens when you challenge authority on these airlines." What would you have done if you were in Sophia's shoes? What punishment do you think is appropriate for behavior like Karen's? Let us know in the comments below, and click on the subscribe button now. With Officer Reynolds standing guard nearby, Karen was firmly directed back to her seat. Though physically compliant, she continued her verbal assault, now including the off-duty officer in her allegations of mistreatment. As she was being seated, a new piece of information suddenly entered the already volatile situation. "Oh my God," exclaimed one of the teenagers from a few rows back, staring at her phone in disbelief. "The video is already blowing up. It's been shared like 1,000 times in the last 5 minutes. Her friend leaned over to look at the screen. "No way. It's trending already? Hashtag Plane Karen is taking off," the first teen confirmed, her eyes wide with excitement. "People are saying she's gonna get arrested when we land." Karen's head whipped around at the mention of videos. For the first time since the confrontation began, a flicker of something new crossed her face. Not remorse, but fear. The realization that her actions had been recorded, that evidence of her assault was already spreading across the internet, seemed to penetrate her righteousness for the first time. "You're recording me? That's illegal," Karen suddenly shouted, making a grab for the teenager's phone. "You don't have my permission." Officer Reynolds stepped in immediately. "Ma'am, there is no expectation of privacy in a public space like this aircraft. The passengers have every right to record." "Delete that right now," Karen demanded, ignoring the officer and addressing the teenager directly. "I'll sue you and your parents for defamation." The girl, surprised by the sudden aggression but emboldened by the protective presence of the officer, clutched her phone tightly. It's too late anyway. It's already online, and thousands of people have seen it. This revelation seemed to trigger something in Karen. With growing desperation, she began looking around the cabin, suddenly aware of just how many passengers had their phones out. She made a sudden lunge across the aisle, attempting to grab another passenger's device. "Give me that. You're all conspiring against me." Officer Reynolds firmly but carefully restrained her, ensuring she remained in her seat. "Ma'am, if you continue this behavior, I will have to restrain you for the remainder of the flight." As this confrontation unfolded, another passenger who had been quietly observing the situation suddenly spoke up. "Wait a minute. "I recognize you," he said, addressing Karen. "You're Karen Wilson from Skystar Capital, aren't you?" The name landed like a bombshell in the cabin. Skystar Capital was well known in the aviation industry as a major investment firm with significant holdings in several airlines, including, as it happened, the very airline they were currently flying. "You work for one of this airline's biggest investors," the passenger continued, the irony of the situation not lost on anyone within earshot. "Isn't your firm on the board?" Karen's expression shifted from anger to panic. The implications were immediate and obvious. Not only was she facing potential criminal charges for assaulting a flight attendant, but her professional reputation and position were now squarely in the crosshairs as well. That's not relevant," she stammered, her previous bluster notably diminished. "This is about how I've been treated as a customer." "So you're saying an employee of airline investments at Skystar Capital doesn't know that assaulting flight crew is a federal offense?" Another passenger chimed in, the disbelief evident in his voice. The solidarity among the passengers was remarkable. Those seated near Karen formed a protective barrier around the teenagers and other passengers who had recorded the incident. When Karen made another grab for a phone, 3 people simultaneously moved to block her. "We all saw what happened," stated an elderly woman firmly. "You assaulted that young lady who was just doing her job. Shame on you. She was wonderful to all of us, and you treated her terribly," added another passenger. "We're not going to let you intimidate these kids or delete the evidence." As the aircraft began its descent toward Denver, something extraordinary happened. A spontaneous round of applause broke out for Sophia as she emerged from the galley area, cold compress still held to her face, to ensure all passengers were properly secured for landing. The show of support, hundreds of people expressing their solidarity through applause, visibly moved the flight attendant, who offered a small, grateful smile despite her injury. As the plane descended, the captain himself emerged. Captain David Reynolds handed control of the aircraft to his first officer and made the unusual decision to personally assess the situation in the cabin. Captain Reynolds made his way directly to where Karen was seated. His expression was grave as he surveyed the scene. "Miss Wilson," he addressed her directly, his voice carrying the natural authority of someone accustomed to command. "I've been informed of what transpired, and I want you to understand the seriousness of the situation. We have diverted this aircraft at significant operational cost due to your actions, which constitute a federal offense under aviation law." When Karen tried to defend herself, the captain cut her off. "I've received reports from multiple crew members and dozens of passengers, all consistent in their account of events. More importantly, I've viewed footage of the incident that has already been transmitted to our ground operations team." In a final desperate move, Karen hissed, "Do you have any idea who I am? Skystar Capital controls 12% of your airline's stock. One call from me and your career is over." Captain Reynolds fixed her with a steady gaze that had the entire cabin holding its breath. "Miss Wilson, in my 32 years as a commercial pilot, I've had the displeasure of dealing with several passengers who believed their connections or status placed them above the law. Every single one of them discovered they were mistaken." He leaned in slightly, his voice level but carrying an unmistakable note of steel. "My responsibility is to the safety of everyone on this aircraft. Your company affiliation is irrelevant to that duty. Now, I suggest you remain silent for the remainder of this flight." Inside the cabin, Sophia, still holding the cold compress to her face, supervised the preparation with remarkable composure despite her injury. The aircraft touched down and taxied to a remote area of the airfield where the police vehicles waited. Captain Reynolds' voice came over the intercom one final time. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to the security incident that prompted our diversion, We will be deplaning in a slightly different manner than usual. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until instructed otherwise." Within minutes, 3 uniformed Denver police officers boarded the plane. They conferred briefly with the flight crew before making their way down the aisle toward Karen's seat. It was at this moment that Karen made her final, desperate play. As the officers approached, she unbuckled her seatbelt and attempted to move into the aisle, addressing the surrounding passengers in what appeared to be a last-ditch effort to rewrite the narrative. "This is all a terrible misunderstanding," she announced loudly. "I was provoked and mistreated. Please, if anyone here saw how they discriminated against me, speak up now." Her appeal was met with stony silence. Not a single passenger came to her defense. Instead, dozens of phones were raised again, recording her final moments on the aircraft for posterity. And for the social media feeds that were already exploding with the initial footage of the assault, the lead police officer reached her row and addressed her directly. "Miss Wilson, I'm Officer Diaz with the Denver Police Department. We've received reports of an assault on a crew member. I need you to come with us." "This is ridiculous," Karen protested. "I barely touched her. She's completely exaggerating her injury for attention." Officer Diaz remained professionally impassive. "Ma'am, please gather your belongings and come with us." "I will not," Karen responded, her voice rising again. "I have connections at this airline. I want to speak to your supervisor immediately." "Miss Wilson, you can either walk off this aircraft with us voluntarily, or we can place you under arrest and escort you off. Which would you prefer?" This ultimatum seemed to briefly stun Karen into silence. She looked around the cabin one last time, perhaps hoping for some last-minute intervention or support, but found only the unwavering gazes of dozens of witnesses to her behavior. When Karen attempted to walk off the aircraft unrestrained, Officer Diaz gently but firmly stopped her. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but due to the nature of the allegations and your behavior as reported by the flight crew, we will need to place you in handcuffs." "Handcuffs?" Karen's voice rose in genuine shock. "You cannot be serious. Do you have any idea who I am?" "Yes, ma'am, we've been fully briefed on your identity and occupation," Officer Diaz replied calmly. "Please turn around and place your hands behind your back." The click of the handcuffs closing around her wrists was audible throughout the cabin. For many passengers, this was the moment the seriousness of the situation truly registered. What had begun as merely entitled behavior had escalated to the point where a corporate executive was being led off an aircraft in handcuffs. As Karen was escorted toward the front of the aircraft, she passed by Sophia, who was giving her statement to another officer. Their eyes met briefly, the assaulted flight attendant with her swollen cheek and cold compress, the handcuffed passenger who had struck her. In that moment, the power dynamic that Karen had tried so desperately to establish throughout the flight was finally, definitively reversed. As Karen was finally led off the aircraft and onto the jetway, the cabin erupted into spontaneous applause. Not celebratory, but rather an expression of collective relief and solidarity with the crew who had handled the situation with such professionalism. Meanwhile, inside the terminal, an unexpected scene was unfolding. Word of the incident had spread like wildfire, not just through social media but through official channels as well. Denver International Airport was now playing host to an impromptu media gathering, with local news crews setting up cameras near the security area where Karen would eventually be escorted through. The videos posted by the teenagers had been reposted by several major social media accounts, accumulating hundreds of thousands of views within the first hour alone. Local news stations had dispatched crews to the airport almost immediately. As passengers began to deplane, they were surprised to be approached by reporters asking for their accounts of what had transpired. Many willingly shared their perspectives, creating a real-time, multi-angle narrative of the incident that would dominate local news that evening and national news by the following morning. The airline's senior representative made a brief statement to the assembled media. "We are aware of an incident that occurred on a flight today which necessitated a diversion to Denver. The safety and well-being of our passengers and crew is always our highest priority. We have zero tolerance for any form of assault or abuse directed at our team members." By the time Karen, still in handcuffs, was escorted through the terminal toward a police vehicle waiting outside, the hashtag #PlainKaren was trending nationally on multiple social media platforms. The teenagers who had captured the original footage were being contacted by major news networks for permission to use their videos. And Sophia Martinez, still providing detailed statements to authorities in Denver, had no idea that she was about to become a symbol of grace under pressure for millions of people across the country. While Karen faced the justice system, her professional life crumbled with stunning rapidity. Skystar Capital, the investment firm where she had served as a director of airline investments, issued a public statement just 18 hours after the incident. Skystar Capital has zero tolerance for violent, discriminatory, or unprofessional behavior of any kind, regardless of context. The actions displayed in the widely circulated videos from Flight AA2478 are completely inconsistent with our firm's values and expectations for leadership. Effective immediately, Karen Wilson is no longer employed by our organization. We extend our sincere apologies to the flight attendant involved, the airline, and all passengers affected by this unfortunate incident. The airline itself released a more measured statement, careful to respect the ongoing legal process while firmly supporting their employee. What happened next for Sophia Martinez transformed what could have been a traumatic career setback into an unexpected turning point. 3 days after the incident, while still recovering from the physical and emotional impacts of the assault, Sophia received a phone call that would change the trajectory of her career. The airline CEO, Michael Brennan, personally called to check on her well-being and to express the company's support. What began as a courtesy call evolved into something much more significant when Brennan mentioned the extraordinary volume of positive passenger feedback the airline had received about Sophia's conduct. "In my 15 years leading this airline," the CEO told her, "I've never seen such an outpouring of support and admiration for a crew member. Dozens of passengers have written to commend your professionalism, restraint, and dignity under absolutely intolerable circumstances." By the end of that call, Sophia had been offered a promotion to senior cabin crew trainer, a position that would not only increase her salary by 35%, but also provide more regular hours. A life-changing development for a single mother who had struggled with the unpredictable schedule of regular flight service. The airline publicly announced Sophia's promotion 1 week after the incident, timing the announcement to coincide with their introduction of enhanced passenger conduct policies and crew protection measures. The press release featuring Sophia's story and new role became the airline's most shared social media post of the year, generating overwhelmingly positive public response. But perhaps the most touching development came from an unexpected source. The elderly couple who had witnessed the entire incident from nearby seats started an online fundraiser titled "Standing with Sophia," hoping to raise a modest sum as a gesture of appreciation for her grace under pressure. Their simple campaign resonated far beyond their expectations. Within 9 days, over 30,000 people had contributed to the fund, raising more than $150,000, money that would allow Sophia to establish a college fund for her daughter and make a down payment on a small house in her neighborhood, freeing her from the rental market that had consumed so much of her flight attendant's salary for years. When interviewed about the outpouring of support, Sophia remained characteristically humble. "I was just doing my job," she told reporters. "The real heroes were the passengers, who stood up for what was right, who refused to let intimidation win the day." The incident on Flight AA2478 serves as a powerful reminder of several important truths in our increasingly connected world. First, that racism should never be allowed. And secondly, that service workers, whether in the sky or on the ground, deserve basic dignity and respect, regardless of a customer's status or frustrations. The days when "the customer is always right" could be used to justify abusive behavior are rapidly fading, replaced by a growing consensus that mutual respect must be the foundation of all service interactions. If you enjoyed this story, hit the like button, subscribe, and share with your friends and family.